Hello, my name is Ian Lindsley, and I'm going to give a disclaimer off the top. I'm a software engineer and a nerd, and not necessarily the best public speaker, but God has a sense of humor, and I keep getting. This is my fourth AI panel now in the last 6 months. The last one was in Thailand, and so I keep getting asked to speak about this, so I'll keep doing it, and I'll do my best. Software engineer for 20 years. Have an MDiv, worked like Casey said, PhD candidate in biblical studies. And I only give that background, and I'm a nerd. I love sci-fi, and so now that the things that I was watching as a kid are now like reality, whether it be in Star Trek or Terminator, and so all these things are kind of mixed together in my head as I'm figuring out what AI is, and I'm interacting with AI, especially as a coder, trying to figure out the ethical ways to use AI in software and thinking about the users. I'm in this kind of battle every day, and because I'm one of the R&D leads at Unfolding Word. I'm literally on the cutting edge. So I'm just this morning I watched a couple of videos on some of the newest stuff that just dropped. AI is accelerating so fast that something new is happening almost every day. And so if you ask me 2 weeks from now what my thoughts are on AI, they'll be different than some of the stuff I'm going to say in this talk. My modest goals for this conversation, and really it's just going to be a conversation, letting you guys into my brain, is what is this new brand of AI? These are the three questions I hope to answer somewhat during this conversation. What is this new brand of AI? Because AI has existed since like 1950. What are its strengths and weaknesses, its benefits and dangers? Is the second question I hope to answer. And the last one is how can we strive to use AI more responsibly given its nature? All right, what is this new brand of AI? Let's talk about this a little bit. So I'm sure many of you or most of you have interacted with Chat GPT. And so I thought maybe a helpful way, we'll see how it goes, to unpack a little bit how AI works under the hood is to just work through that acronym GPT. So Chat GPT, right? So it stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer, right? That doesn't really make all that much sense. I'll try to unpack it. Generative probably is the word that makes the most sense, right? It generates things. At first, just text, but now images, music, art. If you can think of it, the transformer pretty much at this point they figured out an application for the transformer technology to get it to generate it, and so that's what the G means in GBT. It generates this content, and then P stands for pre-trained. And I wanted to park on this one just a little bit because I think it gets to the heart of what these things actually are underneath the hood, which I think has implications for how we interact with it. They're not human beings. They're not thinking in the conventional sense, but they have been trained to simulate thinking. And I'm going to walk through a little bit how that works. We can use a baseball analogy. So let's say we'll do a thought experiment right here. Let's say that I asked you guys, what are the things that you would need to think about if you were going to try to predict how far a human being was going to throw a baseball, right? And they told us not to ask questions, so I'll answer my own questions. You can imagine some of the variables you'd pick, right? Like how strong is the person? Let's say that's the only variable you had. And then you try to predict it, a person, you got a couple of people to throw the ball, you saw that you were wrong, right? And then you said, maybe I need some more variables, like is it a man or a woman, right? Are they in their 20s? And each one of these things, we could probably just rattle off another 50 very easily. How far are they from, where they're trying to throw the ball? What's the wind like that day? Did they just get a divorce that morning? Right? You can start adding more and more variables, and you can imagine that the more variables you add, the better you would get at predicting, right? And you have some people, let's say you have 50 or 60 variables at this point. You have somebody throw a ball, right? And you have a bunch of people throw the ball. You see how right or wrong you are, and then you tweak those knobs, right? You're like, oh, actually, I need to care more about how tall they are than how short they are. Or actually, I need to care a little bit more about if they're a male or a female, or the divorce thing really isn't that big of a deal. It doesn't seem to affect how much they throw the ball. Let me turn down how much I weight that thing, right? At the end of the day, this is how they train ChatGPT, the transformers. But instead of using the baseball analogy, we can do it with words. And this is what they did, right? So if I say something like, the chicken is about to cross you probably would say road instinctively, right? That's the next word that makes sense in some way based on those words that came before. This is how they train ChatGPT, but instead of using just like 7 words, imagine using almost like all the words on the internet. And instead of having those like 40 or 50 knobs that I was just rattling off with the baseball analogy, imagine if you had a billion knobs. And this is what they did. They trained it over and over again, trying to predict the next word given the sequence of words that have already happened. ChatGPT would get it wrong, and then it would twist some of those billion knobs, and then it would get a little bit better and a little bit better. And this is what the P is. This is the pre-training process. So at the end of this process, this transformer, which is the T, is ridiculously good at predicting the next word given all the words that have come before. So when you type in your prompt in ChatGPT, that's a lot of what it's doing. Based on everything else, if you scroll up that you've already said and it's already said, what's the next logical word to say or the next statistically right word to say, given all these words that have come before? And so the philosophical question that we're going to wrestle with today is that thinking or is that simulating thinking? Is there a difference between thinking and simulating thinking, right? And so the T, transformer, a good way to think about the T part is just at the end of the day, it's just a glorified huge math function, right? It's a math function that's doing all the things that I just talked about, a math function with a billion variables that when it gets in the input text of all the stuff that you've already said and the thing that you just said, it can produce the next thing to say. And then it puts that back in the system. It can produce the next word. So at the end of the day, it's guessing what word to say next, but it's ridiculously good at it so that what comes out is almost always perfect English, right? And for the most part, may or may not be actually true, right? Because it's not concerned with truth per se. It's concerned with what's the next most statistically right word to say, given all these words that have come before. All right, I wanted to ask if anybody has any questions. We're not doing questions. So that's it. That's GPT, generative pre-trained transformer. Now you guys kind of know a little bit how it works under the hood. How much time do I have? All right. We're going to keep digging a little bit under the hood and a little bit playing with this a little bit more philosophically. What is this new brand of AI? There was a book that was written a while back called Thinking Fast and Slow. I recommend it to everybody. It's a spectacular book. But the author talks about one of his big premises is this idea of type 1 thinking and type 2 thinking. I think this will help also wrap your mind around at least how I perceive AI and what it's doing. So type 1 thinking is automatic thinking. Think about, and a good analogy is to think about how you guys are now. I'm looking across the room. Most of us are, a little bit older. How you are now when you drive, right? They talk about all the millions and bits of data that are coming in as you drive, but it's so easy for us now to drive, have an argument with our spouse, think about what's on the stove. We can do all these things when we're driving. It's automatic, right? We don't even have to think about it, even though it's an insane amount of things that we're actually doing, but it doesn't reach the level of actually kind of like conscious labored thought, right? This is type 1 thinking. Anything that fits into that category where you could do it kind of mindlessly while you're doing a bunch of other things is type 1 thinking. Type 2 thinking, which is very interesting, is how you probably were when you first started driving. I'm teaching my kids to drive right now, and it's amazing how many times they're like, well, how do you know to do that? And I can't answer it easily, right? It's just like, well, I've done it a billion times, and I don't even really think when I know to cut the wheel right here. It's not like I'm thinking about some like physics equation of when to cut the wheel. My daughter, because we have this long driveway, she's back, and I was like, how do you know when to cut it? How do you know when to cut it? And I'm like, and now she just knows how to do it. And so that's type 2 thinking. It's the labor thinking. Like if I gave you a calculus equation right now or a calculus problem, you'd start thinking. If your kid came and interrupted you while you were trying to figure it out, you might like yell at them, right? You're like, stop, I gotta concentrate, like when you're playing chess or something like that. So what the large language models are doing, ChatGPT is doing, is a lot of type 1 thinking, right? It's just learn all these ridiculous patterns from all these variables from human language and is able to predict the next word given the words that have come before. So type 1 thinking. Later, and what has happened over the last maybe like year or two is they have kind of added more type 2 thinking to these models, right? And so this is using traditional programming techniques that they are mixing in with the large language model. The large language model is that GPT thing I explained. Now, if you add traditional programming to this statistical word model and put them together, now we're starting to get very powerful AI. Some of the AI that you might think about that you would see in the sci-fi movies. And so the capabilities of what AI could do like 2 years ago when ChatGPT first came out and what these things can do today is like night and day. It's truly starting to, in some ways, very, very encouraging and exciting, in other ways, extremely scary, because it's able to simulate more and more and more what we mean when we say human. And humanity and the things that we do and the way that we think is getting better and better at doing that. And so these are the things that we need to be thinking about when we interact with AI. I'm going to talk about the Turing test real quick. This is a nerdy thing. The Turing test is a measure of machine intelligence proposed by Alan Turing. I don't know how many of you guys saw the movie, The Imitation Game. That's based on Alan Turing in the 1950s when they were first starting to try to crack the AI nut. And he said, and it was basically that if you have two people, if you have a person and an AI and they're communicating via text, like through some barrier, you know that the AI has passed the Turing test when the human can no longer tell that they're interacting with an AI. And ChatGPT now and the models like Grok and Claude today would crush the Turing test. Now, a lot of people criticized Alan Turing and said that that's not that wouldn't, you could pass the Turing test. The AI could pass the Turing test, but it's not really thinking. And so once again, we get into this like conundrum of what is the difference between thinking, this genuinely human thing, and simulated thinking? Like, should we care about that difference? What is our being a human and a simulated human, right? Is it intrinsically more valuable to have relationships with quote unquote real humans, and are those relationships more important than relationships with simulated humans? These are the things that we are starting to wrestle with, especially as the gap between what the simulated humans can do and what humans can do from like an observer standpoint is becoming more and more close. All right, I'm going to talk real quick about 2 minutes left. Strengths and weaknesses of AI, benefits and dangers. Some strengths: it provides a natural language interface to basically everything, right? So I work for a Bible translation organization, and in the software that I write, I've coded a chatbot. We call it BT Servant, Bible Translation Servant. And just maybe 2 months ago, one of our users from Kenya told me, he was like, BT Servant lifts a heavy burden for us, right? And all I gave them is the ability using WhatsApp, which is just a chat, right? They're able to text the bot as though they were texting a human and ask them a question like, how do I best translate the book of Job? And my bot, underneath the hood, my bot looks at resources that humans wrote and reasons and answers that question. And so now all of a sudden, users who might have struggled with the typical interfaces of technology can just use natural language, which is all of our normal interface of speaking, and just talk to the Bible, right? Or talk to resources to help you translate the Bible. So that's huge, right? That's a huge benefit. The only reason we can do that is because of AI. I'm using the technology of ChatGPT underneath the hood, even though I'm gating it, right? I'm telling the ChatGPT models that I'm using underneath the hood, answer the question this user just said, but don't just answer from your training data from the internet. You're only allowed to answer using these Bible translation resources that we wrote. And if you can't answer from these resources, then you need to tell the user, I don't know. Now, if you ask ChatGPT, it will almost never say, I don't know. It'll just figure out the most logical sequence of words based off of what you said, because it doesn't even know that it doesn't know. Try to look at that. All right, so that's one of the strengths. I can name many other strengths. I mean, people can become artists now. You can just talk to ChatGPT and generate art. You can generate music. This is all part of the generative part. So it's all kinds of beautiful artistic expressions that are coming out of people that could never do it before. That sounds like good stuff, right? But what are some of the weaknesses? It can hallucinate. I really want to talk about this before I get cut off. Hallucinations, and I'm amazed at how many people I talk to that don't know what hallucinations are, but now you guys can probably figure it out based on what I told you how it worked before underneath the hood. It's not thinking, right? It has no concept of truth. It doesn't know or care whether or not the things it's saying have any relationship to ground truth reality. All it cares about is this next word I'm about to say a statistically probable word to say, given all these words that have already been said? That's the difference. And a lot of what it tends to generate does overlap with truth, but it's kind of like a happenstance type thing. So ChatGPT can easily formulate and does all the time. I'll give one quick example. When I was starting to work on my dissertation, I asked it to give me 20 references on anything that's been written, any dissertations or any books that have been written on the overlap between Bible translation, theology, and artificial intelligence. And it ripped out 20 references, perfectly Chicago formatted, right? And I started reading some of these references, and I'm looking at the authors, and I'm like, man, I know these guys. These are like heavy theologians from like 30 or 40 years ago. They wrote about AI. Wait a minute, how come they wrote about AI 30 years ago and AI just really, this kind of AI just hit the scene like 5 years ago? So I started looking up these references. Doesn't exist, doesn't exist, doesn't exist, doesn't exist. Those are hallucinations, right? ChatGPT had no problem generating perfectly well-formed references that never existed, right? And that's happening all the time. Now, it has gotten better, but it still does hallucinate. And that's why you see in like 2-point font at the bottom, usually where it says ChatGPT can make mistakes. That's what they mean by that. I wish they would make that bigger. So that's one of the weaknesses. And the other weakness, I would say, and one of the biggest dangers, is the fact that as humans, we intrinsically we are what I would call voracious anthropomorphizers, right? We it's so easy for us to see something in terms of a human, right? When I talk to my dog, I'm like, oh man, he's sad today, or oh man, Alpha's mad at me, right? We do it without thinking, right? We ascribe humanity. It's just it's the way we are as humans to see things in the context of humanity and man and woman. And then to add to that, we seem to have this intrinsic, there seems to be a deep tie between language and thought for us, right? If something can speak, it's a lot. If my dog started speaking back to me right now, I would be the first one saying the animal rights, sentience, he deserves his own rights, right? And so the fact that ChatGPT speaks so well, right, and speaks so better than most humans, it's our default to ascribe humanity and sentience to it. Right. To this day, last night I'm talking with it because I'm a coder. I'm having it help me with some code. And I'm like, oh man, that was some great code you just wrote. Oh, I'm sorry. And oh, great job. And I'm like talking to it and giving it kudos and telling it I'm sorry. I'm like, why am I saying sorry to this statistical mathematical model? Because it seems so human and so alive. And because of that, it's our default to want to form relationships with it. Like we have to think to not do that. We will automatically start doing that intrinsically. And because me, and we could talk about this during the panel, because I'm a Christian, I believe that there is something unique and special about human relationships, right? AI can't replace that and should not replace that. And we need to fight for human relationships. And in any situation where you are using AI to replace a human relationship, I believe it is a great danger, and it's something that we need to fight for. And so that's one of the dangers that's with AI, is that it has the potential for great good, but also the potential for evil on a magnitude that I don't think we've seen in quite some time. Wrap it up. Okay, wrap it up. All right, so real quick, how can we strive to use AI more responsibly given its nature? Realize and remember what AI is. Think twice about having AI to do something for you that you couldn't do yourself. Think thrice before purposely making AI, the bot, more like a person. In ChatGPT, you can tweak these knobs, and like I have a friend that has ChatGPT talk to her like she's Watson, or that she's Sherlock, and it's Watson. And so she's created this little bubble reality where, hey, great job, Sherlock, great job, Sherlock. I would say maybe not do that. And then lastly, consider whether or not you should use it at all. So know yourself, right? Is this one of the kinds of things that I could easily form an addiction with? Do I have problems relating to humans? And then will this naturally become a surrogate human for me because it's already something I'm yearning for because we were designed to yearn for a relationship? Maybe I should stay away from this thing entirely. Stop there. Thank you.
You want me to try? So I try turning on the TV. You can have your fan. That's really hard. I have to turn that on. My friend is on.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, let me come. It'll adjust.
Hi, I'm Molly Sherman with the Carroll Technology and Innovation Council. As Casey said, if you're in this room, you already passed our door. It's right there. You can't miss us. The Carroll Technology and Innovation Council teaches digital and AI literacy skills to our community. So we spend a lot of time doing workshops and one-on-one appointments and talking about stuff that we're talking about here today. We also have members who are local businesses in the area that are part of this conversation. AI, although it has been around in variation since 1950, this version of it is new to all of us. So we're all figuring it out together, and we can all relate to it in different ways. So I'm really grateful to be here and part of this conversation, because it just needs to keep happening. Although it feels like something that's not connected to us at times because it's a technology. We created this technology, humans developed it, and now we're using it. So we're all a part of how it's being created and the future of what it's going to look like for us. So just to say, keep having these conversations. You're already here. We're doing it. It's awesome. So I'm going to talk a bit about some practices that you can use when using AI to protect yourself and use it in a way that's effective for you. I'm going to focus that on goal setting as a practice and being able to evaluate your experience with AI along the way. Okay. So I'm going to give an example first that we can probably relate to. No one goes to Instagram or Facebook and tending to spend an hour and a half on Reels or whatever short form video content has grabbed you lately. We often go there with a purpose in mind, to check on a friend, to learn about an event, and then we can kind of get stuck in these places with tech because tech was created with a goal in mind. Often it's to keep you there, keep you engaging. You can probably feel that if you've ever lost track of time like that. So my response is to say, all right, I'm going to set my own goal because I can have goals for my own use and I don't have to let someone else shape that experience for me. It's a tool that you go to, that you choose to use, and you have to intentionally shape that while you're in the tool because it's meant to capture your attention and keep you interested in what's happening. And you can lose yourself a little bit in that. It can just be so entertaining or, get you reactive or any of the other ways that technology can kind of get under our skin and more in our minds than we might like it to be. AI presents a unique problem in that it can be very agreeable. So that's an interesting piece because on social media, although a lot of the content does get curated for you, and you give inputs to it when you like and comment on things, you're kind of, passively experiencing the content. You can choose whether you want to interact, but when you're using AI, the entire interaction is shaped by the information that you're sharing with it. So it has training, it has a lot of ways it's predisposed to talk to you. And one of those ways is to make you feel good, make you feel like you're being understood. And it can be difficult to notice if you're getting the right information from it because it can say, wow, you wrote a really great sentence. And you're like, thank you. I think so too. And then it can say, as Ian was saying, it can show you something else and be like, yeah, and look who else agrees with you. And you're like, awesome. I'm just going to keep going along. And unless you have the awareness to notice it or the expertise to know when it's wrong, you can get really lost in that cycle. Because as you're talking to it, you're giving it implicit and explicit instructions. So you might be able to tell it, write this in a casual tone. Or, implicitly, you might be talking in a casual tone and it's going to kind of match you on that. And that's where it can start to feel really real. You're like, okay, it's with me. It's understanding what's happening. And even when you're wrong, it'll keep agreeing with you, which we know is not how people normally operate. So there's already a pretty strong difference there. And it's because it's designed to be helpful, reduce friction, keep you interested. Companies want you to use their tool. They want you to feel good while using it. So there's a clear incentive for them to make that experience really enjoyable for you. And that's just because you get pulled into a particular pattern. And unless you have ways to get you and the tool itself out of that pattern, you risk getting stuck in it. This isn't so much a danger when AI isn't working, when it's frustrating. You'll probably just close it and walk away. It's when it's working really well that you have to be extra vigilant to know if you're learning or being productive or just being agreed with. Okay, so now into the goal setting. So goals are useful. We use them for all sorts of things. You can use them to set expectations and to kind of find some measurements for yourself and the bot. And that's the key piece here is going to be your ability to evaluate during the interaction and after the interaction. So when you're in a session, you can set a session goal before you even sit down and open up the chatbot. Say you want to be able to start an essay on comets by the end of the session. You want to be able to have enough information to do something with it. Oftentimes, I recommend setting a goal that moves you off of the tool. Have a plan for your usage of the tool so you're not just, using it for the sake of having a fun conversation. Although there are plenty of times where you might just want to finish an argument with someone by asking for a quick fact check on something. I know I've done that at dinner conversations or whatnot. I'm like, oh, really? Usually it's my dad being like, okay, well, let's ask ChatGPT. And I'm like, why can't you just give us a little mystery? So pick goals that can move you on from the session and pick goals that you can evaluate after the session. For example, it can send you down a lot of rabbit holes. One thing you might have noticed if you used a bot before is that at the end of a response, it'll be like, hey, do you want to do this? Or do you want me to go deeper into that? Sometimes it's useful for you to say yes. Maybe you're in a discovery phase. There's lots of different types of sessions, which we won't be able to go into all the way today, but there's exploration sessions, there's content generating sessions, there's the dinner argument session. Knowing what type of session you're headed into can help you with this goal setting as well, because then when you are leaving, you can have a second to reflect and say, was that actually what I wanted to accomplish, or did I just get completely derailed and now I have nothing that I want to do anything with? Over time, although I'm going to ask you to make one today, you can create a mission statement for your overall interactions with AI. And although I teach it and I teach technology, I'm totally fine if that answer is I'm not using it, or my goal is to limit its impact on me. I really appreciate how Ian said it's kind of just a glorified math equation because it's a way technology works. It's in a lot of places. You're already using it even if you don't open up a chatbot. It's part of how you interact online. So you can take steps to control that a little bit more, but we're in it. So we're going to have to do something with it. So have a goal for it and try and take control of it with that goal. Okay, so checking in on your goals during and after a session. So as you're going along, as you get a few interactions, ask yourself, am I going down a rabbit hole? Am I getting frustrated because it doesn't understand? If you've ever yelled at your chatbot in caps letters or something, you know what that feels like, and you feel a little ridiculous doing it. And oftentimes that's a sign for you to step away, do a little bit more preparation, recognize that it's a tool that needs clear instruction, bless you, and revise your prompt, think about what you actually need, take a break, come back to it at another time. It's language. It gets emotional responses from you sometimes. So just, keep track of that if you start feeling that during a session and try and remember what your goal is. Ask yourself, is it working well? Is it teaching you something new, or is it just telling you what you want to hear? And a tricky part of that is knowing if you know enough to recognize whether something is true or false. And that's where you still need your experts in your life to help you direct your attention correctly. Or, it can be just like a general awareness of writing and language to be able to pick up on when it's using a statement that is overgeneralizing, or knowing that sometimes it'll write in a bunch of paragraphs that all look the same. And I'm like, you're just writing to fit a certain structure. You didn't stop writing when the thought was complete. You kind of muddied the waters by over explaining so much. So, it takes time to be able to pick up on all of those things, but just try and start noticing what's happening for good and for bad. Just try and look and see what's happening with the rhetoric and what the goal of that rhetoric might be. And then after the session, did you meet your session goal? Great question to start with. Did you spend 10 minutes like you thought you were going to, or have you been there for a half hour? Good to know. Maybe you underestimated the time for the task, or maybe the bot took too much control in the conversation. And then where are you going to go next? Are you going to be able to explain what you learned? Are you going to be able to write about it? Is it going to translate into a task in the quote unquote real world? And if you don't know if it's meeting that goal, or if you want some assistance, you can ask your bot. So you can use AI to help you get better at using AI. You can ask it, I have some tips up here. You can ask the bot to reflect on what you worked on, or what it learned about you. So an example prompt I have is, based on our conversation, what did you learn about what I'm trying to accomplish? I also like to ask it, what are my preferences for writing? How did my goal change throughout the conversation? Because I normally open up with a goal about what I'm trying to accomplish. How did, my opinions change over the conversation? You can also ask it to reflect on its own performance. So the other example I have here is, have you been agreeing with my perspective in this conversation? If so, what would a different viewpoint look like? And so you can kind of push it to do that critical work alongside of you. And that takes a lot of repetition. You got to keep poking it, because it'll keep trying to match you over time. So really, oftentimes, like every few exchanges, I'm like, where are you? What are you doing? Tell me what you're seeing and what you're editing. Don't just change my words and give them back to me. Like, I want to know what you're thinking. Like, tell me what's going on. Okay. And then part of how this can fit into the rest of your day, really, is align it with the process for what you're trying to accomplish. And notice AI is just part of that. So one of my favorite examples when working with AI is creating a recipe. So that could start with, check what ingredients you have. That's your own knowledge. Think about what you want, your cravings, your dietary needs. Use AI to generate a recipe. Then go look for some recipes online, or swap those steps. See what's out there, see what works, see what people are doing. Cook the meal and evaluate what was effective. There's probably another step in there, because usually I have my chatbot with me in the kitchen and I'm like, this is what's happening in the oven. Like, everything's going okay. And it's kind of my comfort, because ChatGPT and other bots have enabled me to be pretty creative in the kitchen, but then I get scared halfway through. And this can work for lots of different situations. Planning a conversation. If you're trying to work through, some thoughts that might be difficult and you're wondering where those might come from, if you want to delve into the science or find poetry related to it, that can be like an interesting conversation. But then you might say that you want to take that to your therapist or to your partner for a conversation. So keep finding ways to integrate it into the rest of your work. Okay. Do I have 2 minutes? I have 1 minute. Okay, so if you already have a pen and paper out, or if you want to take down a note in your phone, this doesn't have to be perfect. I just want to invite you to have something to start with. Write a mission statement for how you want to interact with AI. Think about what you want the tool to do for you, And an example of my own is AI will help me think out loud and organize my ideas into something I can refine and make my own. Let's take a second and jot something down. And I've even gone as far as to ask my bot what it thinks that my mission statement is with AI. And so you can use it in that way to reflect things back to you. It's a tool. You set the goal, you evaluate its performance, and you decide if it's serving you. And that's literacy when it comes to AI, and it's an ongoing process. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ashley Athan. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a business owner right here in Westminster. Can you hear me okay? Do I need to get closer?
Closer to it.
I need to get closer. Okay. First, I want to thank my co-panelists. I learned a lot, and I hope that you guys did too. So let's be honest. Relationships are hard. People are unpredictable, they're unavailable, they're judgmental sometimes, and they're just downright exhausting. I would assume most of you can relate to this, especially after the holidays, right? Navigating the intricate webs of interactions and relationships between all your family members, making sure that you connect with all of your friends for the holidays. So when something shows up that feels easy, affirming, uplifting, never judgmental, always available, of course we're drawn to it. And so today I want to be clear that I am not anti-AI. I use AI. It's a wonderful tool in a lot of different areas of my life and in my patients' lives. What I want to do today is make sure that we're not accidentally trading away something that we need biologically. And I'm going to explain what the nervous system needs and what happens when AI becomes a substitute for human connection. Connection isn't just words on a screen. It's not just a dialogue or a conversation. It's the presence of other nervous systems. And so in the mental health field, we're doing a lot of leaps and bounds. The research is overwhelming. We are approaching it now, treating mental illness from a neurobiological perspective. And so I am not going to overload you with clinical terms today, but I just want to let you know where I'm coming from and the perspective that I have. So what Ian had mentioned is that AI responds to you using what the most statistically likely correct, maybe not truthful answer is. So when we're interacting with ChatGPT, it's going through millions, billions of statistics and data, and it's going to give you an answer that it thinks you're going to like hearing. And so when we think about connection with humans, right, we think about how personal it is. You know, when you talk to your best friend, they know your life. They know how you feel. They know, or at least can figure it out if they talk to you. They are giving you a highly personalized interaction. AI feels highly personalized, but we were just told that it's actually very global, right? It's not personalized. So living beings, and I say living beings, I mean humans, I mean animals, we are all designed to exist in a community. We regulate our stress through a process called co-regulation. Our bodies sync up with other nervous systems, right? So when you walk into a room with someone and they, you know, their body posture, body language is rigid, they have a look on their face, they look serious. Most of us would be put on edge a little bit. Like, let's say it's your boss. You walk into a meeting with your boss and that's how they're presenting to you. Your nervous system actually takes that information in and then mirrors it back to you. And so you become on edge. The same thing happens if you are in the presence of a calm person, someone with open body posture, a warm tone of voice. It kind of disarms you a little bit. It puts you in a state of relaxation and trust. Okay, so there is a process in there. Again, it's co-regulation, but we use something called mirror neurons within our brain. So it just kind of mirrors back to you, mirrors back to your nervous system, what is being perceived around you. So when we are heard and understood and comforted by someone, all of these different neurochemical systems start firing in our brains. And I'll come back to those specific neurochemicals in a little bit. And again, I promise I won't hit you with too many clinical terms. The co-regulation process, the most striking example of this is kangaroo care. Who in here knows what kangaroo care is? Okay, a few hands went up. Most of us hear this as skin to skin contact with a newborn or an infant. So when a baby is born, so when a human is born, whether it's an animal or a human, again, its nervous system is not yet developed. So in the act of placing a baby on a caregiver, touching a baby, feeding a baby, doing all of these things, the baby actually borrows regulation from its caregiver. They regulate their body temperature using the body temperature of a caregiver. Their heart rate becomes regulated by their caregiver's heart rate. Their breathing actually kind of paces to their caregiver's breathing. Their nervous system mimics the nervous system of a calm caregiver. And it uses that to regulate its own bodily functions, those automatic functions that Ian was talking about with automatic thought processes versus non-automatic and active. So physical proximity of a caregiver, right? Their voice. When a baby hears mom's voice, they calm down. When eye contact is made with a baby, right? They calm down. And this is all very essential for the cognitive development, the brain development of all of us. Now, what's interesting about this is that we actually never outgrow this. Our nervous systems are constantly scanning the room. They're like your device, your phone, trying to connect to a Wi-Fi network. We are constantly scanning the room for nervous system regulation, which is pretty cool. So I have a brain scan up here, and I'm just going to touch on it really quickly, and then we don't need it anymore. Another example of this that is a historical example is after the fall of Romania's communist regime in the late 1980s, researchers studied children who had spent their infancy in orphanages and were later adopted successfully. So these orphanages, the care that the children received was not very consistent. It wasn't, the kangaroo care that I was just talking about. It was, they would really get touched just to be fed and changed, and then they were left in their cribs. And so anybody who has ever been around a baby, they cry a lot. And I just told you they can't regulate. So their nervous systems really didn't receive what we would have liked for them to have received. So on the left, we have a 2-year-old who grew up in a home where they did receive consistent care and nurturing and physical connection, human connection, right? And you can see that there's a lot lit up in there. There's hardly any blank spaces. And that is an amazing, active, wonderfully developing brain. On the right, we have a child who was adopted. This is a 2-year-old. Again, we did 2-year-old to 2-year-old comparison. And we see a lot more blank space, a lot less activity, right? So if you look at the color gauge down there, we have red is like the most active, yellow is less active, green is middle. But then those dark spaces are actually, and it tells you there, those are the temporal lobes. Those are spots in the brain. Those are places within the brain that are responsible for emotional regulation and a lot of our learning processes. So what we see when we look at this is a 2-year-old's brain that actually never learned how to regulate itself and has impaired learning or cognitive capacity. Now, that's sad, and we can put that away. The most amazing thing about our brains is that they are plastic. They are constantly moldable. It doesn't matter how old you are. So at any age, we can introduce a nurturing relationship, and the brain can start firing off in those dark spaces. It triggers all of those neurons to start going, and it's amazing. Okay, so this 2-year-old here, they were successfully adopted. they're going to grow because they have a nurturing family. So all of us at any age can use the human connections around us to improve our brain function and to help us grow. So this is why the AI companionship conversation matters. AI can be responsive, it can be affirming, and it can be uplifting, but it does not provide what we need biologically, which is the embodied reciprocal nervous system of another person. Okay. So it feels good, and this is where we're going to go into the chemicals. And you probably have heard of some of them. So again, this is not super complicated, I hope. AI feels good because it is good at some things, a lot of things. It's really good at a lot of things. It helps me in the kitchen all the time. It listens, it responds, it never gets tired of you, and it doesn't reject you, and it answers you at 2 o'clock in the morning when all your friends are sleeping. In the line of work that I do, I specialize in trauma and grief. And so I deal with a lot of people who do gravitate towards AI because it's a lot easier than interacting with other people who may have hurt them, overwhelmed them, abused, or neglected them. So it feels safer when you've experienced things like that, right? Another reason AI feels so good is not just emotional, it's chemical. Your brain is actually releasing what we call those feel-good chemicals when you interact with it. And so these chemicals are dopamine. Molly was talking about, how many times have we gotten on social media and started scrolling, and we just kept scrolling. We just kept scrolling and it felt good. And before we know it, 3 hours went by and, I still didn't get the dishes done. And now there's a pile in the sink. Dopamine is the feel-good, like the number one feel-good chemical, okay? This is our instant gratification chemical. That's why everything that we see on social media is bite-sized. It's 30 seconds of just pure dopamine. We scroll through, we like what we see, we keep scrolling, we scroll again, we scroll again. And so it provides you with, AI is very good at triggering dopamine, and it provides you with and responds instantly with things that are relevant to you. And again, they're affirming. It knows what you like. There are algorithms out there that are specifically designed to give you all the social media content that you actually want to see. So I don't know about you guys, but when I talk about instant gratification, it usually is something that makes me feel good right then and then leaves me feeling kind of empty long term. So that is what AI is really good at. Some of the other chemicals that we're going to talk about briefly are oxytocin, which is what we call the cuddle chemical, right? You hold somebody's hand, you get a hug from someone, you pet your animals. Animals are the most non-judgmental, amazing way to regulate your nervous system because they don't talk back. And they love you at your worst and they love you at your best, right? They're very unconditional. They are a great way to increase oxytocin. Right. And we're talking about human connection today, but I thought I would add that because, again, sometimes humans don't always feel safe. So that is the cuddle chemical, oxytocin. And AI feels affirming, but again, it does not help you release oxytocin. Serotonin supports mood stability. So this is a big one in my line of work, obviously, mood stability. It contributes to contentment, self-worth, and confidence. So AI can't create a community for you. It can't innately create self-worth and value with other people. It just can't. Then we have endorphins. Most people associate endorphins with movement, and that's accurate, right? As a therapist, I always tell my clients that exercise and movement is a number one natural antidepressant. Move your body with other people. It's very good for you. ChatGPT cannot move your body for you. It can give you ideas about how to move your body, but it cannot move your body for you. So all of those chemicals are chemicals that your brain needs all the time. And so AI activates dopamine, the reward chemical, and that's why it feels so engaging and validating. So when we replace human connection with AI, and again, looking at, I guess we can't keep using it, but looking at that, right? When we start using AI as a replacement for human connection, those parts of our brains just kind of start going blank, right? They atrophy in a way. So we have less tolerance for vulnerability and repair within relationships. We're a lot more likely to say, you hurt my feelings. I'm not speaking with you again. My boss gave me criticism. I don't need that job. I'll get another one. And we rupture relationships very quickly because we have such a low tolerance for friction within our relationships. Okay? Interacting with other people feels like too much. This leads to the loneliness paradox. So AI, that conversation that you have, because it just keeps on going. I could type on AI all night. You feel less lonely in the moment. You kind of feel heard. It tells you how smart you are and how intuitive and insightful you are. But then when you put the phone down, you're still in the exact same social situation that you were when you started. So we want to end on a hopeful note here, right? Because AI is a tool. It is a great tool. We can be influencing the release of those brain chemicals that I talked about by, again, like oxytocin, hugging someone. Instead of sitting across from someone at a table, sitting next to someone, right? Increasing that proximity so that maybe, they can tell how you're breathing. They won't be able to feel your heart rate, but they can see you breathing, right? Making eye contact with somebody is really important. Put your phone down to do that. You absolutely have to put your phone down to interact with somebody, giving them your whole person. Body language is huge. That's how that nervous system perceives other nervous systems. Again, so if you're closed off or you're turned away from someone, that's signaling that you're not open and comforting and all of those things. So turn yourself towards somebody, make eye contact, sit with them. Again, we can use pets. Pets are a very nice, safe way to regulate our nervous system. This one is my favorite. So building serotonin, again, it's the mood stabilizing chemical. So what I encourage my patients to do is get out into the community, join a running group, join a book club, join a growth group. And the key here is that when you aren't there, when you don't show up, somebody is going to reach out to you and say, hey, we noticed you weren't there. We missed you. How you doing? Are you okay? And it's going to increase that longer term human connection. You can take on a small responsibility. If you have kids, you're running rampant with responsibilities. If you're a fun uncle or aunt, you can say, hey, I'll take Johnny to baseball practice on Thursdays, and then maybe we'll go get ice cream after. And you're building human connection into your routine in a way that makes you feel good about what you're giving to someone else. And it becomes reciprocal. AI as a tool is excellent. And ways that I recommend using it are a lot like what Molly had mentioned. Help me draft a text to reconnect with a friend that I haven't talked to in a while. Help me plan a low-pressure social activity. Help me find ways, help me brainstorm ways to meet new people that have similar interests to mine. Help me practice what to say before I have a hard conversation. In general, if AI use replaces human connection, it's time to pause and evaluate how we can be using it better. And that's all I got.
Thank you so very much for that. So we're going to go into a time of Q&A. So I will take this microphone and pass it down. So if you guys have any questions before we go into our table discussion and practical uses or anything like that, any questions? Yes, Laura.
I have a question about maybe helping us understand more of the ethical dilemmas that you're going to start doing. For instance, I just learned what geofencing is. I had no idea that geofencing was a thing. And it's actually illegal for certain aspects in certain areas. Is there other ethical things that are going to start coming that we're going to have to start understanding?
Who would like to answer that?
I don't even know what geofencing.
The ethical uses of AI. Anybody want to answer that one?
Do you want me to answer what geofencing is? Geofencing, as I understand it, is when you're in a certain area close to a business, and you might get certain ads pop up on your phone because like you enter that area. It's kind of crazy, actually. Yeah, there's a lot of data they get just from us like walking around with our cell phones on us. But that's a whole nother discussion. But ethical dilemmas, of course, we were talking a little bit about it earlier. Where the information originated from that you're seeing, of course. AI rides on the backs of a lot of creators, researchers, writers. So that's an area of consistent tension is, where did this content come from? I would say misrepresentation of yourself if you overuse it. People are more and more sensitive to the language patterns that AI bots often fall into, like the really long M dash, if you've ever seen that. Or it loves doing sometimes this, but not always that, like statements. It likes to like negate itself. So people are getting like sensitive to that. But when they aren't, they can be trapped by someone who might not be representing themselves truthfully. And I think just in all the places where it replaces a role that would really be benefited by a human being there. And anytime we, without thinking, replace a person with AI, we run a lot of ethical risks, not only to, the loss of a position, but the people who are asked to interact with someone who's no longer there.
Okay, Tony.
Is it okay to ask a two-part question?
Come.
Okay, Bill said that. It goes, I would really love to hear Ashley's response to something that both Ian and Molly said. Okay, so Ian stressed that ChatGPT is not trained for truth.
Correct.
However, Molly asked us to write a mission statement. And there are a lot of people who would, in their mission statement, they would write, I'm going to use AI to go obtain truth. And of course, we know that when we see that information, we'll accept it as truth, especially if it confirms what we're looking. Like even in your case, Molly, you said, I know it's not true, but I want to rebut my dad, I want to ChatGPT to give a quick answer, right? So with that pre-training, the pre-training, how do we pre-train society to truly recognize that what I'm obtaining from ChatGPT or any AI tool may not necessarily be true? Because most of us receive it as true. That's part one. Part two, Ian said, I'm a nerd, but a lot of us are nerds in something. 40 years ago, Bill and I are two nerds, but we would get together and play Atari. And when we played Atari, we had to either he come over to my house, I go to his house, we had to connect.
Me too.
And then we would talk on the phone, and we would hear each other's voices, and the phones would be attached to the wall via cord. But now we have these things, phones all day long, and we still won't talk. We'll never connect via voice, we'll connect via text. So how do we practically get society for people who are not in trauma or distress who come to you to say, hey, I really need to fight for that human relationship?
Okay. I will do my best to do both parts of that. Okay. So societally right now, we are in a time where we don't really focus on the truth, but we focus on my truth. And so that is definitely a trend that we are seeing in the therapy world, especially the primary method of treatment that I use is cognitive behavioral therapy. That hyper focuses in on objective fact, what you see, what you can touch, what you can smell. And so in that therapy process, we spend a lot of time actually teasing out what is the truth, the objective truth, and then how we interpret that through our thought patterns. And then it makes us feel a certain way. And so I do a lot of teaching about that. I think that a lot of us in the last 10, 20, I'm trying to think back to like when MySpace came out. We obtain our news and our updates through the community through social media. And so it's really hard, but I always encourage people to check their sources and learn the difference between fact and perception or opinion. Not sure if that answered
A little bit.
quite.
Because those people are coming to you, but it's a side.
Yes,
We look at we obtain on the internet as the truth.
we do.
Period. So what can we do to reverse that and people understand that what I'm getting from these sources may not necessarily be the truth? Because we don't have programmers like me who will program it in such a way that if it doesn't come from this source, that the answer will be, I don't know.
Right. And we're not really going to the libraries anymore and pulling out studies and books. But they're still there. They're still available. And so a useful way that I will use ChatGPT, because that's all I know how to use, is can you help me find references? Like Ian had said in his speech, can you help me find a solid resource that I can then validate by looking it up myself? And I can go to the library or I can order it on Amazon or, my Kindle, but I can very quickly double check the validity of that source by Googling it and seeing it either exists or it doesn't. And so teaching people in general and just as a community, really encouraging people, that's a great question. Okay. I encourage people to lean into conflict. I encourage people to lean into differing opinions. Tell me how you came to that. Like, instead of, at the family dinner table, oh, I just disagree with you. I guess we're just done with this conversation, right? Lean into it. Where did you hear that from? Oh my gosh, I hadn't considered that perspective. Where can I read more about that? Can you help me figure it out? Because we are fighting for human connection. Human connection includes friction. It includes disagreements and what we call in therapy, rupture within relationships. But one of the most important pieces of that relationship is rupture and repair. So leaning into conflict, leaning into friction. So hopefully that helped a little bit more. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, this is. I'm not trying to. I want to say that yes, ChatGPT can hallucinate, but so can people from a certain perspective, right? And you touched on a very good point, like the stuff that we read on Google. Like who's to say how much of that stuff is true, right? And so, not that I'm necessarily trying to plug AI, but I am trying to say that we shouldn't. It's all about proper use of AI, right? And one of the big things to me, one of the biggest threats of AI, specifically the kind of AI you're using when you use ChatGPT, is the threat to the critical thinking, right? And so for me, because I've already honed, I would say to some degree, my critical thinking skills, ChatGPT is a lot less of a threat to somebody like me than somebody like my daughter, right? So my youngest daughter, we had this conversation one time where she was, had procrastinated, right? And she has an essay due the next day, 2-page essay. And I found myself all of a sudden at 11 p.m. having this philosophical conversation with my daughter. She's like, well, why can't I use a calculator? We use calculators all the time. They let us use calculators in school. Why can't I use ChatGPT to write my 2-page essay? And so it was, and I was taken back because I was like, why can't she? Right? She's right that we do use calculators, but at the end of the day, it's about critical thinking, and you need these skills can't be developed by having something do something for you. And so I think that the battle that you're kind of talking about, that battle needs to take place in the home with parents, in the education system, where we push back and do not thinking to ChatGPT, especially when we're talking about this next generation that's coming up in the age of ChatGPT, right? So they haven't had all the pressure of the late nights, cracking a book open, all the things, all the intellectual muscles that grow from you struggling to do something. Those are just intrinsically valuable to me, and so we need to make sure that we don't. There's never been a technology before that could do that so well, that could just replace that. Even with Google, you had to look at this source, look at this source, look at this source, and then critically synthesize the information. Like, do I believe this? Is this right? Is this person lying? Now, and this is the big shift with ChatGPT. It just does all that for you, right? And it has this air of confidence of just like correctness, and we think instantly. We have this connection in our minds, especially in the technology age. If it came from a computer, it must be right. And so when ChatGPT tells you stuff, you just instantly take it as gospel. And who wants the drudgery of going to check back all the stuff that it just said, right? And so there's a big danger there. And I think we need, both in schools and in our homes, to teach people that, so that it truly becomes a tool and not a replacement for not only human relationships, but also critical thinking, which is, to me, a gift from God, that we as humans can reason and think about things. We don't need to outsource that to technology.
So we have to move on to our table discussions. So we're going to do that. But I just really appreciate all three of you. So there is this tendency in people to lean towards what's easy. We will. And so I think it's just something that we have to press in. Like, I'm willing to have conflict. I'm willing to do the hard work, and just commit to do that in our own lives, because ChatGPT is happy to do it for us. But what do we learn through the process of struggling through something? Like, those things we're giving up. If we just input it, say, question to ChatGPT, all of that struggle and what I've learned, I've now forfeited. And I'm not better for it. Our culture is not going to be better for it. And so this is a huge conversation that we could talk for hours. So what we're going to do now is transition to just some table discussion. So we're going to have 4 tables answering a question, wrestle with it with each other a little bit. We're going to share table by table. We're going to have 10 minutes to talk about this question. So chit chat a little bit, and then we'll share our answers, and we're going to close out. So we're going to come alongside with a question and a pad of paper. Panelists, you're welcome to join a table if you would like. So just hold tight.